The sun was hot that afternoon, the kind of heat that made the marble driveway of the Gregory mansion shine like glass. A long black car had just left, carrying guests in suits and perfumes worth more than most people's yearly salary. But nobody saw the woman standing by the gate. She didn't belong there. Her dress was wrinkled. Her shoes were old and dusty. Her skin, darkened by days under the sun, glistened with sweat. Her arms were round, her cheeks full, and her back hunched slightly, not from weakness, but from carrying a life full of secrets. A heavy bag hung from her shoulder, filled with who knows what. She looked tired and hungry. The guard looked up and scoffed. "You lost, madam?" The woman looked at him calmly. "I was told to report here. They're expecting a maid." The guard laughed, loudly, then looked over at the other guard who had just come out of the security post. "See this one? Says she's the new maid," he said, holding his stomach. "Like this is a soup kitchen." The second guard joined in the laughter. But the woman didn't laugh. She just stared at them, still as a wall. "Name?" the first guard finally asked, still chuckling. "Brenda. Brenda Emanuel." He checked a list on a tablet. His smirk froze. Her name was there. She was expected. Still frowning, he waved her in. "Gates open. Try not to scare the rich folks, yeah." As she stepped through the gates of the Grand Gregory estate, she kept her eyes forward. But behind her back, servants leaned out from the balconies, whispering, "Is she really the new one? She looks like she lives in a dumpster. How fat can one person be?" Even the birds seemed to hush. The mansion stood tall, white pillars stretching into the sky like giant fingers. The floors were polished so bright you could see your reflection. A fountain sprayed water high into the air, dancing like it belonged in a palace. Brenda didn't blink. She walked straight to the back entrance. That was where maids entered. She knew. Inside the servants' quarters, she was met with stares. Maids dressed in crisp uniforms, neat buns, and light makeup looked her up and down like she was a disease. One girl even covered her nose. A woman with sharp eyes and too much perfume stepped forward. "Mrs. Amma, the head housekeeper." "You're late," Mrs. Amma said. "I wasn't given a time. I don't like disrespect." "I'm not here to disrespect." Mrs. Amma folded her arms. "Do you have any experience cleaning a house like this?" "Yes." "Where?" Brenda paused. "It's not on paper, but I know how to clean." Mrs. Amma sighed loudly, turned, and began walking. "Fine. We'll see how long you last. We've had 5 new maids this month alone." They all left crying. Brenda followed. They passed long hallways filled with paintings of old white men in suits, ancestors of the Gregory line. The air inside was cold, too cold. But Brenda didn't shiver. Mrs. Amma showed her a small room in the back. It had no windows, just a bed, a closet, and a mop in the corner. "This is yours. Uniforms in the drawer. Wake up by 5 a.m. sharp. No sleeping in. No talking back. No stepping into the main house unless called. And never, I repeat, never speak to the family unless they speak to you first." Brenda nodded. "Understood." Mrs. Amma leaned closer. "And one more thing, don't think your size gives you power here. You're not special. You're just another maid." Brenda looked her in the eye. "I didn't come here to be special. I came to clean." Later that day, Brenda stood in the massive dining room, holding a tray of glasses. Her hands were steady, her face blank. The Gregorys were home. Mr. Gregory sat at the head of the table, eating slowly while scrolling through stock updates on his phone. His wife, a tall woman with cold eyes, barely touched her food. Their 3 children laughed at a joke the youngest one had just told, a joke about poor people and their smell. Brenda stood silently in the corner. Then, as if on cue, the youngest, Jason, barely 20, picked up his glass of red juice, walked over to Brenda, and tripped. The juice splashed across her uniform. Cold. Sticky. Everyone burst into laughter. "Oh no," Jason said, badly pretending to look shocked. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there. Maybe if you were a bit smaller." More laughter. Even the mother chuckled behind her napkin. Brenda didn't move. She just stood there, eyes on the floor, holding the tray like nothing had happened. "Should we call for someone to mop her?" the middle daughter whispered. "She might need a mop for herself," Jason added. The joke spread again like wildfire. Mrs. Amma rushed in and dragged Brenda out of the room. "What did I tell you? Keep your head low. Now go change. And if you cause one more scene, I swear, I'll throw you out myself." Brenda said nothing. She walked back to her tiny room, closed the door, and stood still for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled something out. It was a small silver case. Inside it, folded neatly, was a photo. A younger version of her, in a sleek black dress, smiling beside an older man in a wheelchair. They were standing in front of a building with a golden logo, G Holdings. She stared at the photo. Then slowly, she smiled. Just a little. The next morning came too early. The sky outside was still dark when the bell rang loudly through the servant quarters. It was 4:55 a.m., but Brenda was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed, tying the old shoelaces on her worn-out sneakers. She didn't need the bell. She hadn't slept much. She'd been thinking, remembering, watching the crack in the ceiling above her bed. The photo she had looked at last night was now hidden deep in her bag again, folded away like a secret too loud to speak. She stood up, fixed her cap, and stepped out into the hallway. Maids were rushing around, tying aprons, brushing their hair, fixing collars. Brenda walked quietly past them toward the laundry area. She had been assigned to floors and laundry today, the hardest work, the kind that left your back burning and your fingers raw. She didn't complain, but others did. "Look who's up," one of the younger maids whispered as Brenda passed. "That dress is still too tight. I swear it's going to rip one day. She probably eats leftovers at night. Look at her size." Brenda kept walking. She heard every word, but her face didn't change. Her back stayed straight, her steps calm. At the laundry room, she rolled up her sleeves and began soaking the sheets. The water was freezing. The soap stung, but she scrubbed without a sound. By 7 a.m., her hands were red and sore, but she moved to the next task, mopping the hallways upstairs. The Gregory mansion was wide. Endless corridors, each with shiny floors and doors that probably cost more than an average man's car. Every step she took with the mop felt like dragging a weight behind her, but still she moved with a rhythm. Then, out of nowhere, a voice. "You missed a spot." She looked up. It was Lisa, one of the older maids. Tall, slim, and always wearing lipstick even though they weren't allowed to. "I was coming back to that side," Brenda said calmly. Lisa leaned against the wall with her arms crossed. No, let me guess, you're too tired. Or maybe your hands are too soft. Or wait, maybe you're just not used to real work." Brenda didn't answer. She dipped the mop again and kept going. Lisa didn't like that. "Who do you think you are anyway?" she hissed, stepping closer. "Just because you're big doesn't mean you're better. We all saw the way you stood there like a statue when Jason poured juice on you. What were you waiting for? A medal?" Brenda paused. She turned slowly and met Lisa's eyes. "I wasn't waiting for anything. I just didn't see the point of making a scene." Lisa rolled her eyes. "You talk like you're some queen. You're not. You're just another poor, dirty, overweight woman who was lucky to get in here." Another maid walked by and joined in. "If it were me, I'd be embarrassed to show my face. I wouldn't even apply for a maid job looking like that." Brenda looked at both of them. "I'm not here to fight with anyone. I came to work. That's all." Lisa leaned in closer and whispered, "You're not going to last." Then she walked away, laughing with the other maid. Brenda watched them go. Then she turned back to the floor, pressed the mop down, and kept cleaning. By lunchtime, her back was stiff and her neck ached. But the mansion sparkled. She had cleaned every tile in the east wing and folded 3 loads of laundry. In the kitchen, the other maids were eating and laughing. She entered and poured herself a small cup of water. Nobody offered her food. She didn't ask. Just as she was about to step back out, Jason Gregory walked in. The room fell silent. Jason wore a loose white shirt and shorts. His hair was messy, like he'd just woken up, but his smile was already sharp. "Hey," he called. "Fat Maid." Everyone froze. Brenda turned slowly. He tossed a dirty napkin at her feet. "Clean that." It fell. She picked it up without a word. Jason leaned against the counter. "You know, it's weird. My mom always says we should be nice to the help. But then people like you show up and make it hard. You don't even try to fit in. You just exist." Brenda looked at him. "I'm doing my job, sir." He smirked. "Barely. I don't think this place is built for people like you. It's a high-class home, not a farm." The kitchen filled with soft giggles. Jason reached into the fridge, pulled out a soda, and turned to go. But then he stopped and turned back. "You know what would be fun?" he said. "A bet. I say she won't last more than 3 days. What do you think, Lisa?" Lisa laughed. 2 days max." Brenda didn't reply. Jason raised his soda like a toast. "To 2 days. Let's see." He walked out. Brenda stood there for a moment, eyes on the empty doorway. Then she turned, walked out of the kitchen, and headed straight for the cleaning closet. She needed something to do, something to keep her hands busy. She didn't want to think about what was just said. Or maybe she didn't want to remember. But inside her something stirred, something like fire. That night, while the others rested, Brenda stayed awake in her room. She looked again at the photo of the old man beside her in the black dress. She ran her fingers over his smile. "You told me they'd show me who they really are," she whispered. "You were right." A knock came at her door. She folded the photo quickly and stood. It was one of the kitchen staff, an older woman named Esther. She looked tired and nervous. "Sorry to disturb you," Esther said, "but I saw what happened today. In the kitchen." Brenda nodded once. "It's okay." "No, it's not. It's not okay. Jason is a devil. Always has been. And Lisa? That girl has ruined more lives than she has friends." Brenda looked at her. "Why are you telling me this?" Esther stepped closer. "Because you didn't cry. You didn't fight. You just stood there like a mountain. And that scared them. I saw it. They don't know what to do with someone like you." Brenda said nothing. Esther looked around, then leaned in. "I don't know who you are, but I don't believe you're just a maid." Brenda's heart jumped. Esther smiled softly. "Don't worry. I won't say a word. I just wanted you to know. Not everyone here is blind." Then she turned and left. Brenda stood there for a long time. The silence wrapped around her like a blanket. But inside her, a storm had already begun. If you're enjoying this video so far, consider subscribing to my small channel. My girlfriend promised to make me chocolate chip cookies if I hit 1,000 subscribers. It would mean the world to me. That's it, and thanks for listening this far. Now let's continue. The next day was worse. Lisa and the other maids began hiding Brenda's cleaning tools. They mixed salt into her mop water. One even poured oil across a hallway floor Brenda had just scrubbed, blaming her for the mess. "Can't you do anything right?" Mrs. Amma shouted in front of everyone. "Do you want to be sent away too?" "I did clean it," Brenda said calmly. "Someone poured." "Are you calling me a liar?" the other maid screamed, pretending to be shocked. Mrs. Amma didn't listen. "One more mistake and you're out." Brenda nodded. That evening, Jason threw a party in the backyard. Friends came. Loud music shook the walls. Brenda and 2 other maids were told to serve drinks. As she passed out glasses, a tall girl laughed and pointed. "Who let the pig serve wine?" Jason chuckled. "That's our new house mascot." Brenda stood there, holding the tray, eyes blank. The girl reached for her camera. "Let's take a picture. Show the world how the rich are helping the poor." Jason posed beside Brenda, draped his arm over her shoulder, and smiled. Click. Brenda didn't move, but her hands were shaking. Later that night, alone in the laundry room, she whispered to herself, "Soon, very soon." And outside the mansion, across the street, a man sat in a parked car. He watched her through a small camera lens, taking pictures one by one. It was almost midnight when Brenda finished folding the last set of towels. Her back ached badly. Her arms felt like they'd fall off. But she didn't complain. She never did. She just kept moving. The Gregory mansion had fallen quiet. The guests were gone. Jason's loud music had finally died down. Lights were out in most rooms. Only a few hallway bulbs flickered dimly, casting long shadows across the cold tiled floors. Brenda carried the towels back to the storage closet near the east wing. The hallway there was different, colder. The walls had fewer decorations, and the paintings looked older. She had never really walked this far into this part of the house before. Most maids avoided it, but tonight something pulled her in. She opened the closet door, placed the towels inside, and as she turned to leave, she saw it. A door. It was at the very end of the hallway, half hidden behind a large plant that looked like it hadn't been watered in weeks. The door was different from the others. Thicker, darker wood, and with a faded golden handle that seemed older than the house itself. She stared at it for a moment. Something about it made her heart beat faster. She looked around. No cameras. No footsteps. Nothing. She walked over slowly. As she got closer, she noticed a small plaque on the side of the door. Mr. Charles Chamberlain, office. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the handle. Locked. She expected that. Still, she stood there, hand resting on the cold metal. She remembered that name. Charles Chamberlain, the former business partner of Mr. Gregory. The man who had vanished from the public eye almost a year ago. Everyone thought he had died quietly after selling off his shares. But no one knew the truth. Except her. Her breath slowed. She closed her eyes. She could still hear his voice. "I want you to see the world for what it is, Brenda," he had told her. "One day, these people will show you their real face. And when they do, you'll know exactly what to do." She opened her eyes and looked at the lock. No sound in the hallway. The air felt still. Then she noticed something at the base of the door. A small dent. Like someone had once tried to force it open. Or maybe it had been slammed too hard. She bent down. There, half buried in the corner, was a key. Old. Rusted. Couldn't be that easy. Could it? She picked it up, heart pounding. She stood up, looked at the lock again, and slowly slid the key in. Clicked. The door creaked open a little. Her chest tightened. She pushed it slowly and stepped inside. The room smelled of dust and old paper. It was dark, except for the moonlight coming through a narrow window. The furniture was covered in white cloths. A large desk stood in the center with bookshelves lining the walls. Everything looked untouched. She walked in and gently closed the door behind her. This was it. This was Charles's room. She pulled the cloth off the chair and sat down slowly. The desk had a few papers scattered across it. She picked up one. It was a letter addressed to B.E., her initials. But the letter wasn't finished. Just a few lines. "Brenda, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back in time. Don't be afraid. This house, this company, this world, they will try to crush you. But remember what I told you. The contract is real. The shares are yours. And when the time comes, show them who you are." Her hands trembled. A sound made her freeze. Footsteps. Someone was coming. She stuffed the letter into her pocket, covered the chair again, and slipped behind the bookshelf. She held her breath. The door creaked open. A flashlight flicked on. Mrs. Amma. She stepped into the room, looked around suspiciously, and called out, "Is anyone here?" Brenda pressed herself against the wall, heart thudding. Mrs. Amma stepped further in, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. She walked slowly around the desk, shining the light over everything. Then her eyes landed on the chair. She frowned. She walked closer, then ran her fingers along the armrest. Dust. Except one spot. Her expression changed. She turned quickly and left the room, locking the door behind her. Brenda waited a full minute before exhaling. Then she stepped out, her legs shaking. She had to leave. She cracked the window quietly and slipped out into the side garden. The grass was wet with dew, and her feet sank slightly into the ground. But she didn't stop moving until she was back inside through the kitchen entrance. She went straight to her room, shut the door gently, and locked it. She sat on her bed, breathing hard. Her hands shook as she pulled out the letter and read it again. The shares are yours. That was what Charles had told her months before he died. That he had made her the legal owner of his company shares. That he trusted her more than anyone. That she would take over everything one day. He had warned her that the Gregorys wouldn't like it. And now she was here, right in their home, watching them, learning them. She leaned back slowly. Her cover wasn't blown. But it was getting risky. The next day came too soon. At breakfast, she walked past Jason as he yawned on the couch. He didn't look at her. But his friend, the same girl from the party, did. "Hey!" she called. "Maid!" Brenda stopped. "You left the back window open last night. Do you want thieves to come in?" Brenda blinked. She had forgotten to close the window after sneaking back in. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll be more careful." The girl sneered. "You better be. One more mistake, and you'll be sleeping outside." Jason chuckled without looking up from his phone. "She probably sleeps better on the street anyway." Brenda walked away. Her heart was racing. That window. That room. Mrs. Amma. The timing was too close. Someone would figure it out soon. By noon, the tension in the house had shifted. Whispers floated around the servant quarters. "I heard someone snuck into the east wing last night. Mrs. Amma was searching rooms this morning. They say a letter was stolen." Brenda cleaned the floor silently. She knew they were watching. At lunch, she stepped outside to breathe. That's when Esther came over. "You okay?" Esther asked. Brenda nodded. "Just tired." Esther looked around. "Something's off. There's too much noise today. Are you sure you're safe?" Brenda looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" Esther leaned in. "Last time someone went near Mr. Charles's old room, they were fired. No warning. Just gone." Brenda's face stayed calm. "I didn't go near it." Esther nodded slowly, but she didn't look convinced. "I believe you," she said quietly. "But be careful. That door holds more than just old furniture." Brenda looked away. She knew exactly what that door held. And it was only the beginning. Brenda stood by the window in the maid's quarters, wiping her hands with a damp cloth. The air outside was thick with heat. The garden workers were already trimming the hedges for the big event that evening. Inside the house, everything was louder than usual. The kitchen was a mess of smells, shouting, and banging pots. Silverware clinked nonstop. The head chef shouted orders like a general in a war. Maids rushed in and out, balancing trays and glass bowls like tightrope walkers. Everyone moved faster. Tonight was no ordinary dinner. The Gregory family was hosting some of the most powerful people in town. Business partners, investors, news editors, even politicians. Everyone important. Everyone with money. And Brenda? Brenda was on serving duty. "You'll carry wine and clear plates. That's it," Mrs. Amma had said with a sour face earlier that morning. "Do not speak. Do not smile. Do not embarrass this house." Brenda had nodded like she always did. But something about the way Mrs. Amma had stared at her felt different. Tighter. Like she was waiting for her to mess up. Like she wanted her to. By 6 p.m., the dining hall was glowing. Long golden chandeliers hung over the table like floating suns. Crystal glasses sparkled. The walls were polished. The long table stretched almost from one end of the room to the other, covered in a white cloth so smooth it looked like snow. Dozens of plates, glasses, and silver spoons were lined up in perfect order. Guests started arriving in loud cars and fancy suits. Brenda stood near the back wall, holding a tray with wine bottles. Her uniform was tight around her arms, the fabric stretched. She had ironed it twice, but still it looked wrinkled no matter what she did. Jason walked in wearing a navy suit, hair slicked back. His mother wore a tight red dress with matching heels that clicked loudly as she walked. Mr. Gregory was already at the far end of the table, shaking hands with an older man in glasses. Brenda stayed still. A voice whispered behind her, "Don't drop anything tonight. You won't get another chance." It was Lisa. Brenda didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the tray in her hands. Then the dinner started. The waiters moved like dancers. Clean, fast, quiet. Brenda followed them, pouring wine gently, collecting plates. Nobody looked at her. Until they did. About halfway through the meal, Jason lifted his glass. "This wine," he said loudly, "tastes like regret." "Who picked it?" Laughter. One of his friends shouted. "Must have been the fat maid." Heads turned. Eyes landed on Brenda. She froze for a second, then looked down and turned to walk away. But Jason wasn't done. "Wait," he said. "Come back." Brenda stopped. "Come here. Don't be shy," he said with a smirk. She walked over slowly. "Pour me another glass," he said, holding his cup out lazily. She did, careful not to spill a drop. "You know," he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "we believe in charity in this house. My mother even let one of the homeless feed our dog last year. But I never thought we'd go this far." More laughter. Brenda didn't move. Jason wasn't even looking at her anymore. He was staring straight at his guest across the table, like he was showing off. "But I guess everyone deserves a shot, right? Even people who clearly ate the rest of the staff." Louder laughter. One guest, a woman in a blue dress, hid her mouth behind a napkin and whispered something to the person beside her. They both looked at Brenda and chuckled. Brenda stood straight, her hands tight around the wine bottle. She didn't say a word. Jason looked at her again. "You know what?" he said, suddenly rising to his feet. "We should toast. A toast to second chances. To the kindness of rich people like us. And to our hard-working staff. Especially the ones who don't fit in." He raised his glass. Everyone clapped lightly. Brenda turned and walked away as quickly as she could without running. Back in the kitchen, she placed the tray down and stared at the floor. One of the younger maids leaned over and whispered, "Why do you let him talk to you like that?" Brenda didn't answer. The maid frowned. "If it were me, I would have slapped him." Brenda turned slowly and said, "That's why it's not you." The girl looked confused, then walked away. Minutes passed. The dinner dragged on. Brenda returned with another tray, desserts this time. As she walked around the table, offering slices of cake and little cups of cream, her eyes met someone else's. A woman, younger than the others, maybe in her late 20s. Curly brown hair, simple black dress, no jewelry, no fake smile. She wasn't laughing like the rest. She had a small notepad in front of her, like she was pretending to take notes. Brenda moved to serve her last. As she placed the plate in front of the woman, their eyes locked again. The woman smiled softly. "Thank you," she said gently. Brenda blinked. It was the first kind voice she'd heard all night. She nodded and moved on. Back at the wall, Brenda kept watching her. The woman was looking around, writing things down. But she also kept glancing toward Brenda from time to time. After the guests left and the staff began cleaning up, Brenda was in the dining hall picking up used napkins when she heard a voice behind her. "You handled that well." She turned quickly. It was the same woman. Alone now, holding her purse and that same notepad. Brenda stood still. "Sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to be slow." The woman smiled. "You weren't. I just wanted to say, that boy was cruel, and you didn't react. That takes strength." Brenda didn't answer. The woman took a step closer. "I'm a journalist. Name's Julia. I write for City Circle." Brenda frowned slightly. "I know this family well," Julia continued. "I've covered their events before. But tonight, something felt different." Brenda looked down. "I'm just a maid." Julia tilted her head. "Are you?" Brenda looked up sharply. Julia smiled again. "Never mind. Maybe I read too much into things. But if you ever need to talk, I'm around." She placed a folded card on the table beside Brenda and walked off. Brenda picked up the card. It had Julia's name and number. She tucked it into her pocket, along with Charles's unfinished letter. That night, Brenda didn't sleep. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling again. Voices from the dinner echoed in her mind. "Fat Maid. Charity case. Our mascot." But one voice cut through all of them. "Are you?" Brenda whispered to herself. Not for long, because deep down she knew. She hadn't come this far just to serve wine and take insults. She had come to watch, to listen, to wait, and soon to act. The morning after the dinner party, Brenda woke up before the bell rang. The sun wasn't out yet, but the mansion was already stirring. The kitchen lights were on. A driver was washing the family's black SUV in the front yard. Maids were whispering in corners, passing trays and mops and folded linen. Brenda sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands. They were bruised, raw from scrubbing. But it wasn't the pain that kept her still. It was the weight of last night's laughter. The claps, the toasts, Jason's voice echoing inside her head, calling her names in front of all those rich people. She closed her eyes, breathed slowly, and stood up. There was work to do. She dressed in her stiff uniform, tied her headscarf tight, and headed to the main house. As always, she moved quietly, never looking people in the eye. She had been assigned to clean the Gregory's home office that day. That room was always locked. But Mrs. Amma handed her the keys with a strange smirk on her face. "Don't touch anything important," she said. "Just dust. And don't waste time." Brenda nodded and walked away. The home office was upstairs, beside the master bedroom. The hallway leading to it was lined with portraits of men in suits. Gregory men from past generations, each with the same stern face and proud posture. Like the mansion had been built just to hold their names. Brenda unlocked the door and stepped in. It was cold and silent. Dark wooden shelves covered every wall. Books, files, trophies. A large desk stood in the center, heavy with framed photos and silver pens. There was a leather chair behind the desk and a long glass window overlooking the back garden. Brenda stood still for a moment. Then she began to work. She dusted the bookshelves slowly, running the cloth along each row. Every now and then, she'd spot something strange. An old photo turned backward, a trophy for an award the Gregorys never mentioned, a file marked private but left out in the open. She didn't touch them. Not yet. Then, as she bent to clean the edge of the desk, her sleeve slipped down her wrist. A small gasp broke the silence. She looked up quickly. It was the butler, Mr. Amos. He stood at the door holding a tray of mail. His eyes were fixed on her wrist. "Where did you get that?" he asked sharply. Brenda blinked. "Sir, that watch," he said, stepping into the room slowly. "Where did you get that watch?" Brenda pulled her sleeve down fast. It was a gift." Amos walked closer. "That's not just any watch. I know. That model was never sold in stores. Only a few were made, customized. It was designed for board members of Charles Chamberlain's company." Brenda said nothing. Amos stared at her. "You're not a board member." Brenda looked away. "It belonged to someone I took care of." "Who?" "An old man. I worked for him before this job." Amos folded his arms. "That's a lie." "No, sir," she said calmly. "He gave it to me before he passed. He said I earned it." Amos narrowed his eyes. "What was his name?" Brenda paused. Then softly she said, "Charles." Silence filled the room. Amos didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "Charles Chamberlain?" Brenda didn't answer. Amos took a step back like he had seen a ghost. He stared at her face longer this time. Then he left the room without another word. Brenda stood there, heart racing. She hadn't meant to let the watch show. It had been a mistake. But it had opened something. Later that day, the whispering began again. The maids were gathered in the laundry room when Lisa asked loudly, "Brenda, where did you say you worked before?" Brenda looked up from folding sheets. "Different places." Lisa smiled. "Like where? You never talk about it." "I don't think anyone cares." "Oh, we care now," Lisa said with a fake laugh. "Especially after what Amos saw. That watch you're hiding. What is it? A family heirloom? Or did you steal it?" Brenda didn't respond. The other maids laughed. Some looked unsure. Others just wanted drama. Esther, standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. "Why are you always picking on her?" Lisa raised an eyebrow. "I'm just curious. Don't you find it strange, Esther?" A maid with a billionaire's watch. Esther said, maybe it was a gift. Not all rich people are cold like the Gregorys. Lisa snorted. Or maybe someone's pretending to be who they're not. Brenda stood up, folded the last sheet, and walked out. She didn't speak, but her silence made them louder. Later that evening, in the backyard, Jason and his friend Mark were drinking soda and playing loud music. They sat near the pool, shirts off, sunglasses on, even though the sun was already going down. Brenda walked by with a watering can, heading to the flower beds. Mark looked at her and laughed. There goes the secret agent again, he said. I swear. She's probably wearing a wire. Jason chuckled. She's too fat to be a spy. She'd break the roof if she tried to hide. Mark nodded. But that watch, bro. I saw it too. That's no market watch. That's billionaire stuff. Jason shrugged. She probably found it in the trash. Or she stole it. Jason grinned. Maybe we should search her bag. Brenda heard everything. She poured water into the flowers slowly. She didn't look up. But later that night, when she returned to her room, she found her bag open. Her clothes had been thrown on the floor. The watch case was missing. Her hands shook. She ran through the corridor, down the stairs, past the kitchen, until she saw Esther outside the back door. Esther, she cried. Esther turned fast. What is it? Someone was in my room. Esther's face dropped. What did they take? Brenda looked down. The box. Esther grabbed her arm. Come. They rushed back to the room. Inside, the drawers were half open. Her clothes were on the bed. Her shoes had been thrown apart. Esther looked around. They were looking for something. They took the silver box. The one with the watch. Esther said, we need to tell someone. Brenda shook her head. No, we don't. Why not? Because if they know what it means, I won't just be thrown out. I'll be in danger. Esther looked confused. What are you not telling me? Brenda walked to the door and closed it gently. She turned back to Esther. Do you remember Mr. Charles? The business partner? From the news. Yes, I was with him when he died. I was his nurse, his cook, his driver, his only family. He had no one else. Esther blinked. What? He gave me the watch. But not just that. He left me everything. The company, the shares, his part of the Gregory empire. Esther stared in silence. Brenda nodded slowly. I'm not supposed to be here like this. I came to watch, to see how they treat people. I didn't expect it to be this bad. But now they're noticing me. Esther whispered. They can't know who you are. They don't. But they will. Just then, a loud knock hit the door. Brenda and Esther froze. The knock came again. Harder. Then a voice. Brenda, come to the main house. Mr. Gregory wants to see you. Esther turned pale. Brenda stood tall. She smoothed her uniform and walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned back to Esther. If anything happens, she said softly, call Julia, the journalist. Her card is in the bag. Esther nodded. Brenda opened the door and walked out. Her heart beat louder than her footsteps. The Gregorys were waiting, and the truth was getting closer. Brenda walked through the long hallway toward the main living room. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her heart was beating fast, but her face stayed calm. She had learned that long ago. Fear only gave power to people who wanted to hurt you, and the Gregorys wanted power more than anything. She stopped at the doorway. Inside the room, Mr. Gregory was sitting on his favorite leather chair, legs crossed, phone in hand. His wife stood by the window, arms folded tight across her chest. Jason leaned against the wall, chewing gum slowly. Lisa and Mrs. Amma stood off to one side, watching like they were waiting for a show. Come in, Mr. Gregory said without looking up. Brenda stepped inside and stood in the middle of the room. Do you know why you are here? Mrs. Gregory asked coldly. No, ma'am, Brenda replied. Jason laughed. She's pretending again. Mr. Gregory finally looked up. His eyes were sharp. We had a small issue last night. Brenda said nothing. Mr. Gregory continued. Something valuable went missing from this house. A watch. A very expensive one. Brenda nodded once. It was taken from my room. Mrs. Amma gasped loudly, like she hadn't known. Taken? Are you accusing someone? No, Brenda said calmly. I am stating what happened. Jason pushed himself off the wall. Funny how a maid suddenly owns something worth more than this house. Now it's gone. Sounds like a story someone made up. Mr. Gregory raised a hand. Enough. He looked at Brenda again. Where did you get that watch? Brenda met his eyes. It was a gift from Charles Chamberlain. The room went silent. Mrs. Gregory laughed sharply. Don't joke with us. I'm not joking. Mr. Gregory leaned forward. Charles Chamberlain is dead. Yes, sir. And you expect us to believe he gave you that watch? Yes. Jason shook his head. This is insane. Mr. Gregory sighed. Mrs. Amma, check the Maid records. See if this woman even worked for Charles. Mrs. Amma nodded quickly and rushed out. Brenda waited. A few minutes passed. The silence grew thick. Then Mrs. Amma came back in, breathing fast. She's telling the truth, she said quietly. Her name is in the records. She was employed by Mr. Chamberlain for almost 3 years. Mrs. Gregory's smile faded. Mr. Gregory straightened in his seat. And what were you to him? I helped him, Brenda said simply. I cooked, cleaned. I took him to appointments. I stayed with him when no one else did. Jason scoffed. So he gave you a watch out of pity? Brenda looked at him. He trusted me. Mr. Gregory said nothing for a long moment. Then suddenly the front doorbell rang. Everyone turned. Mrs. Gregory frowned. We're not expecting anyone. Mr. Gregory nodded to Amos, who was standing by the door. Go check. Amos walked out. A moment later, voices could be heard. Then footsteps. Then Amos came back in, his face pale. There's a lawyer here, he said. From Halden and Royce. Mr. Gregory stood up sharply. What? Amos swallowed. He says he has urgent business regarding Gregory Holdings. The room exploded with noise. What kind of business? Mrs. Gregory demanded. Did he show papers? Jason asked. Amos nodded. Yes, sir. Mr. Gregory turned toward the door. Bring him in. Moments later, a tall man in a dark suit walked in. He carried a briefcase and wore thin glasses. His face was calm. Too calm. Good afternoon, he said. My name is Mr. Collins. Mr. Gregory forced a smile. Welcome. What is this about? Mr. Collins opened his briefcase and pulled out a file. I represent the estate of Charles Chamberlain, he said clearly, and his majority share in Gregory Holdings. The room froze. Mrs. Gregory whispered, This is a mistake. Mr. Collins continued, As of last week, the legal ownership of Mr. Chamberlain's shares has officially transferred to the beneficiary listed in his will. Mr. Gregory's smile dropped. Beneficiary? Yes, Mr. Collins said. The new owner. Jason laughed nervously. Who? Mr. Collins looked around the room. Then his eyes stopped on Brenda. This woman. No one breathed. Jason laughed loudly. You're joking. I am not, Mr. Collins said. Mrs. Gregory screamed. That's impossible. Mr. Gregory stepped forward. There must be an error. She's a maid. Mr. Collins opened the file and held up the papers. Her name is Brenda Emanuel. Verified. The will was signed, witnessed, and approved. She is now the legal holder of Mr. Chamberlain's shares. Jason pointed at Brenda. She's lying. This is a setup. Brenda stood still, her heart racing, but her voice steady. I never said anything, she said quietly. You asked me where the watch came from. I answered. Mr. Gregory's face twisted. Why are you here? Brenda looked at him. You hired me. Silence crashed down on the room. Mr. Collins cleared his throat. I'll return tomorrow to begin the formal process. Until then, all parties are advised to remain civil. He closed his briefcase and turned to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back at Brenda. Ma'am, he said softly. Your patience has been noted. Then he left. The room erupted. Mrs. Gregory shouted. Jason cursed. Lisa backed away slowly like she was seeing a ghost. Mr. Gregory turned to Brenda, his eyes burning. You planned this. Brenda shook her head. No. I came to understand. Understand what? How you treat people when you think they don't matter. The room went quiet again. Mr. Gregory pointed toward the door. Get out. Brenda nodded once. I will. She turned and walked away. Behind her, the Gregory family stood in shock. Because the truth had walked right through their front door. And tomorrow it would come back with power. The door shut behind Brenda with a hard sound that echoed down the hallway. For a moment, she stood still, listening to the noise behind the walls. Voices rose and fell. Feet paced. Someone knocked over a chair. Someone else shouted her name like it was an insult. She didn't turn back. She walked down the stairs slowly, one step at a time, her shoes making soft sounds on the floor she had scrubbed so many times. The house felt different now, colder, like it had already rejected her. At the bottom of the stairs, Esther was waiting. Her eyes were red. They told me, Esther whispered. They said you're being sent away. Brenda nodded. I know. They said you deceived them. Brenda gave a small smile. I didn't lie. I just didn't explain. Esther grabbed her hand. Please, take this. She pressed a small roll of money into Brenda's palm. Brenda gently pushed it back. You need it more than I do. Esther shook her head. Where will you go? Brenda looked toward the front door. Rain tapped softly against the windows now. The sky outside had turned dark, heavy with clouds. I'll be fine, Brenda said quietly. Esther hugged her tightly. You didn't deserve this. Brenda hugged her back. Neither do you. Be careful. Mrs. Amma appeared at the top of the stairs. Enough talking, she snapped. She needs to leave now. Esther let go slowly. Brenda bent down and picked up her bag. It was lighter than before. Her watch box was still missing. Her letter was safe in her pocket. Julia's card too. She walked to the door. Jason stood there, arms folded, smiling like he had won. You know, he said, blocking her way for a second. I almost admired you. Almost. But poor people should know their place. Brenda looked him straight in the eyes. This isn't the end. Jason laughed. For you, it is. She stepped past him. The door opened. Rain poured down like the sky was angry. Brenda stepped outside. The gate shut behind her with a loud clang. She stood there in the rain, holding her bag close to her chest. Her clothes soaked fast. Water ran down her face, but she didn't wipe it away. Across the street, a car sat with its lights off. Inside, a man lowered his camera and whispered, Got it. Brenda began to walk. Each step away from the mansion felt like a memory peeling off her back. The insults, the laughter, the fake smiles, they stayed behind those gates. She walked past the long driveway, past the trimmed trees and shining walls. She didn't look back. At the bus stop down the road, she sat on a wet bench and rested her bag by her feet. Cars splashed water as they passed. No one looked at her. A phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A message. From Julia. I heard rumors. Are you okay? Brenda typed slowly, hands shaking from cold and rain. I'm out. They fired me. Seconds passed. Then another message came in. Where are you? Brenda looked around. The street was empty. The rain fell harder. At the bus stop by Gregory Estate. Stay there, Julia replied. Don't move. Brenda put the phone away and leaned back. Her body felt heavy, tired. Not just tired from work, but tired from holding things in for too long. She closed her eyes. The rain kept falling. Minutes later, headlights appeared through the rain. A small car pulled over. Julia jumped out, holding an umbrella. She ran over. Get in. Now. Brenda hesitated. I don't want to cause trouble for you. Julia shook her head. You already did. In the best way. Brenda got in. The car drove off, the mansion fading into the rain behind them. Across the street, the parked car started its engine. The man inside made a call. They threw her out, he said. Yes, tonight. It's all recorded. The line went quiet. Then a voice replied, "Good. Tomorrow we begin." The rain washed the road clean as Brenda disappeared into the city. Fired, homeless, and closer than ever to the truth. Julia's apartment was small but warm. The rain had followed them from the mansion to the city, tapping on the windows like it wanted to come in. Brenda sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her bag sat by her feet again, wet from the walk. She hadn't spoken much since getting into Julia's car. Her eyes were tired. Her body was weak. But her mind was still moving. Julia walked in with 2 cups of tea and handed one to Brenda. "You're safe here," she said softly. Brenda nodded. "Thank you." Julia sat down. "I need to ask you something. And I need the truth." Brenda looked at her. Julia leaned forward. "Is it true? Are you really the new owner of Charles Chamberlain's shares?" Brenda took a sip of the tea. It warmed her chest. "Yes," she said quietly. Julia leaned back, shocked. "Then why didn't you say something earlier?" Brenda set the cup down. "Because I needed to see them. I needed to know who they really were. You could have done that from a distance." Brenda shook her head. "No, not like this. When you walk into a house as a maid, people show their true faces. They don't pretend. They don't hide. They think you're nothing. So they talk freely, act freely. That's the only way I could learn who I was dealing with." Julia stared at her. "And what did you learn?" Brenda's eyes narrowed. "That everything Charles warned me about was true." There was silence for a moment. Then Julia said, "I want to help." Brenda raised her head slowly. "Why?" Julia shrugged. "Because I've seen the way they treat people like you, like me. And because this story, your story, it needs to be told." Brenda picked up the cup again, held it in both hands and said, "Then let's tell it." The next morning, the city was buzzing. Phones rang nonstop in the Gregory mansion. Mr. Gregory stormed into the living room with a newspaper in his hand. "What is this?" he shouted, waving the paper. Mrs. Gregory looked up from her tablet. "What? Look!" he shouted again, slamming the paper onto the table. The front page read, "Maid no more. The true owner of Gregory Holdings revealed." Underneath was a photo. It was Brenda, standing in the rain at the bus stop, holding her bag, water running down her face. Jason walked in still half asleep. "Why are you yelling?" Mr. Gregory threw the paper at him. "Read it." Jason picked it up and frowned. "This is a joke." Mrs. Gregory's hands shook. "Who gave them this story?" Jason looked closer. "It says, the press conference is today." Mr. Gregory's phone rang again. He answered angrily. "What now?" The voice on the other side was cold. "You're not in charge anymore." He hung up fast and turned to his family. "Get dressed. We're going." Across town, the hall was packed. Cameras stood like tall robots, blinking red lights. Reporters filled every seat, holding microphones and notebooks. Security guards stood by the doors, hands crossed. Everyone was waiting. The air buzzed with whispers. Is she really a maid? Why would Chamberlain give it all to her? This is bigger than any of us thought. Julia stood near the stage, phone in hand. She looked at Brenda. "You don't have to do this," she said. Brenda smiled. "Yes, I do." She walked onto the stage. The crowd went silent. She stood behind the podium, a simple woman in a plain black dress. No makeup, no jewelry, no bodyguards. Just her. "Good morning," she said, voice calm and clear. "My name is Brenda Emanuel. Some of you may know me from a photo, others from the story in today's papers. I'm here to confirm the truth." The cameras clicked. Lights flashed. "I worked for Charles Chamberlain. For almost 3 years, I was his caregiver, his assistant, his only family. When he died, he left me everything. Not just his home, not just his belongings. He left me his trust." She paused. "In that trust were his shares in Gregory Holdings. As of last week, I became the largest single shareholder of the company." Gasps filled the room. "I have remained silent until now. Not because I was afraid, but because I was watching. I entered the Gregory household not as a businesswoman, not as an investor, but as a maid. I wanted to see who they were when no one was watching. She looked directly into the cameras now. I saw pride. I saw cruelty. I saw people who believed power was something you had to show. But I also saw people, like Esther, like Amos, who treated others with kindness, no matter their title. A reporter stood up. Ms. Emanuel, what happens next? Brenda smiled gently. What happens next is justice. Fairness. A new chapter for Gregory Holdings. And maybe a little hope. Another reporter asked, do you plan to keep the family in their positions? Brenda looked down for a second, then back up. That depends on how they choose to behave moving forward. The room erupted in questions. Why did you hide your identity? Were you mistreated? Did Mr. Chamberlain tell you to do this? Brenda stepped back from the podium. Julia walked up, whispering, that was perfect. Brenda looked over the crowd. They had laughed at her, spit at her, pushed her out into the rain. Now they wanted answers. But soon they would have to face more than just words. They would have to face her. Back at the mansion, chaos had broken loose. Mr. Gregory screamed at the TV. Turn it off. Jason paced the room. She's bluffing. She had lawyers, Jason. Mrs. Gregory shouted. She had papers. We saw them. Lisa ran down the stairs holding her phone. Everyone's calling. They want to know if the story's true. Amos stood quietly in the corner, watching everything. No one spoke to him. He slipped away, went to the back of the house and pulled out his phone. He texted Brenda. They're scared. Everything is changing. Thank you. Brenda saw the message just as she stepped into a black car waiting outside the press venue. She typed back, this is just the beginning. The car drove off. Her face appeared on every screen, every headline. And for the first time in years, the world listened. The maid they mocked was now the woman in charge. Rain fell lightly on the gates of the Gregory mansion as the black car rolled to a smooth stop outside. The same car that had picked Brenda up after the press conference. The same car the Gregorys had once driven past, ignoring the figure who stood outside in the rain, bag clutched to her chest, face tired and silent. But now the moment had changed. The security guard who had once laughed at her twice was the first to run to the gate. His hands shook as he pressed the intercom button. She's here, he said into it, voice low, scared. Inside the house, Jason leapt from the couch like someone had shocked him. She what? Mrs. Gregory stood at the window, lips pressed tight. She's at the gate. Right now. Mr. Gregory didn't say a word. He was sitting on the edge of the coffee table, hands locked together. The newspaper from that morning sat on the floor beside him, Brenda's face on the front page again. Jason paced hard, arms flailing. She can't just show up like this. She has no right to step foot back here. She has every right, Mrs. Gregory snapped. You heard what the lawyer said. She owns the shares now. She owns everything. Not everything, Jason muttered, jaw tight. Mrs. Gregory turned. Don't do anything stupid. Before anyone else could speak, the sound of the front gate opening echoed through the house. Brenda stepped out of the car slowly, dressed in a simple black pantsuit. No umbrella, no makeup, hair tied back. Her eyes focused only on the house ahead. No fear, no smile, just calm. She walked past the guards without looking at them. They opened the front door before she could reach for the bell. Esther stood there. Brenda stopped. Esther's eyes filled with tears. You came back. Brenda nodded once. I said I would. Esther stepped aside, and Brenda walked in. Silence dropped over the house like a heavy curtain. She stood in the middle of the grand hallway. The marble floors, the giant chandelier, the gold-framed paintings. All of it was exactly the same, but everything had changed. Jason stormed into the hallway. You can't just walk in like you own this place. Brenda turned to him. But I do. He scoffed. You're not better than us. Brenda looked at him. I never said I was. You did. Mrs. Gregory stepped in next. What do you want? Brenda paused. Then she looked around slowly, taking everything in. This is not about what I want, she said clearly. It's about what's right. Mr. Gregory came down the stairs, holding onto the railing. His face was pale. You're here to embarrass us. No, Brenda said. You did that yourselves. The silence burned. Brenda walked toward the living room. Let's talk. They followed her. She sat in the same chair where Mr. Gregory had once yelled at her for touching a glass tray too slowly. Now he stood across from her, hands shaking slightly. Brenda leaned forward. Let's talk about the business, she said. Jason rolled his eyes. You don't know anything about business. Brenda looked at him. No? Then why did Charles choose me? Jason's mouth opened, then shut. Mrs. Gregory said, he was sick. He was old. He wasn't thinking straight. Brenda looked at her. He was more clear-minded than anyone I've ever met. He saw things you didn't. He saw people you ignored. Mr. Gregory's voice cracked. What do you plan to do? Brenda looked him in the eye. I plan to take back control. You mean fire us? I mean lead. Fairly. With rules. With truth. Jason sneered. So now what? You think you can sit in a fancy chair and wear a suit and suddenly everyone will follow you? Brenda stood. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, reporters stood behind the gate. Cameras pointed at the house. Drones hovered in the sky. They already are, she said. Jason's face twisted. Mrs. Gregory sat down heavily. We built this. Brenda turned. No, you inherited it. And you wasted it. Mr. Gregory's voice was low. Do you hate us? Brenda paused, then said, no, but I see you now. Esther stepped into the room then, quietly. I've prepared tea, she said. Brenda smiled gently. Thank you, Esther. Jason turned and snapped. She doesn't need to serve anyone now. Brenda looked at Esther. She's not serving me. She's standing with me. Esther smiled through her tears. Always. Brenda turned back to the family. You have two choices, she said. Work with me to clean this mess, or step aside. Mr. Gregory said nothing. Jason shook his head. This is a joke. Mrs. Gregory asked. And if we refuse? Brenda looked at them one by one. Then you'll have to leave, Jason shouted. You can't kick us out of our own house. Brenda said. It's not yours anymore. They stared at her, frozen, broken, realizing too late that the maid they mocked now held the keys. If you're enjoying this video so far, consider subscribing to my small channel. My girlfriend promised to make me a chocolate chip cookies if I hit 1,000 subscribers. It would mean the world to me. That's it, and thanks for listening this far. Now let's continue. Later that evening, after the shouting had died down, after the doors had closed and voices had gone quiet, Brenda stood alone in the study. She looked around at the walls, the furniture, the shelves of untouched books. Then she walked over to the drawer on the left side of the desk. She opened it and pulled out the silver watch box. Someone had hidden it there. Maybe Jason. Maybe Lisa. It didn't matter. She opened the lid slowly. The watch gleamed. She slipped it onto her wrist, quietly, like it belonged. Because it did. She walked out to the balcony. The city lights blinked far in the distance. Julia called just then. Brenda picked up. You were amazing today, Julia said. Brenda looked out at the dark sky. It's not over. No, Julia agreed. It's just beginning. Brenda didn't smile, but her eyes, for the first time in a long while, showed peace. She had returned to the place that had tossed her aside. But she didn't come back for revenge. She came back for truth, for justice, and she wasn't leaving. The house was quiet the next morning. Not silent like peace. Quiet like something was coming. Like the wind was holding its breath. Brenda sat in the same kitchen where she once stood washing dishes while the others laughed behind her back. The table was clean. A soft breeze came through the window. Esther placed a warm cup of tea in front of her. They're still upstairs, Esther said. Nobody has come down. Brenda nodded. They'll have to, sooner or later. Esther sat beside her. Are you sure you want to stay here? Brenda looked around slowly. I don't know, but I need to finish what I started. Esther studied her for a moment. You look different. Brenda smiled faintly. Maybe because for the first time in a long while, I'm not hiding. Esther's voice softened. You were brave. Brenda's eyes grew distant. No, I was just tired of running. 2 hours later, a meeting was held in the Gregory boardroom. All the chairs were filled. Mr. Gregory sat at the far end of the table. His shoulders slumped, his face no longer proud. Mrs. Gregory sat beside him, jaw clenched, hands folded tightly in her lap. Jason sat across the table, arms crossed, eyes full of silent rage. Executives from Gregory Holdings were seated too, along with lawyers and assistants. And at the head of the table, Brenda. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she opened a folder and laid out the papers that proved everything. Charles Chamberlain's will, the signed transfer of ownership, the full legal rights granted to her. Nobody dared question them anymore. Then she looked up. I know many of you are confused, she said clearly. And some of you may even be angry. That's fine. But I'm not here to apologize for being the person Mr. Chamberlain trusted. I'm here to lead. One of the board members, a man named Chief Duro, raised a hand. With respect, he said. You're not what we expected. Brenda looked straight at him. Good. That means I'm exactly what this company needs. Someone else asked, will you be removing the Gregory family from the board? Brenda turned to Mr. Gregory. I don't believe in revenge, she said. But I do believe in consequences. Jason's voice cut through the room. You've already humiliated us. Brenda faced him calmly. No, you did that yourselves. When you poured juice on a woman just because she looked different. When you let your friends mock someone who worked harder than you ever have. When you thought the world owed you something simply because of your name. Jason slammed his hand on the table. This company is mine. No, Brenda said. It was Charles's. And now it's mine. The room fell silent again. Mrs. Gregory's voice was cold. So, what do you want? Brenda leaned back in her chair. The truth. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. You never asked where I came from, or why a woman like me would end up mopping your floors. You didn't care. You saw me, and all you saw was fat, poor, and quiet. But behind all of that was someone who built her strength in silence. She turned around. I was born in a one-room house. My mother cleaned floors until her hands bled. My father left before I could even speak. I worked 3 jobs just to pay for my school. I ate once a day. I walked miles because I couldn't afford bus fare. But I never stopped dreaming. Her voice shook slightly, but her eyes stayed strong. When I met Mr. Chamberlain, he didn't see my size or my poverty. He saw my mind, my discipline. He tested me, watched me, then trusted me with everything. She walked back to the table and placed both hands on the surface. This is not just about shares. It's about heart, about what kind of people we want to be. You ran this place like a kingdom. I want to run it like a family. She turned to the board. I'm not firing anyone today, but I'm watching. We will rebuild this company with respect, with honesty, with real work. Mr. Gregory looked down at his hands. Mrs. Gregory looked out the window. Jason said nothing. Brenda sat down. Meeting adjourned. That night, she stood on the balcony again. The house was quiet. The reporters had left. The air was cool. Esther joined her. Will you sleep here tonight? Esther asked. Brenda nodded slowly. Yes. Esther leaned on the railing. Feels strange, doesn't it? Coming full circle. Brenda smiled softly. It does. Esther laughed. Do you remember your first day here? The way the guards laughed? The way Lisa covered her nose? Brenda's smile faded. I remember everything. You didn't say a word, Esther said. Not even when they mocked you. I kept thinking, why doesn't she fight back? Brenda looked at her. Because I didn't need to. I had a plan. Esther chuckled. I wish I had your strength. Brenda looked up at the stars. It's not strength. It's survival. Then she turned. Do you want to stay on as head of staff? Esther's eyes widened. What? I need someone I trust, Brenda said. Someone who sees people the way I do. Esther blinked back tears. Yes, I would love to. They hugged. For the first time, it wasn't a hug between two maids. It was between sisters of the fight. The next morning, Brenda sat alone in the master office. She pulled out the silver photo frame from her bag. The one with her and Mr. Chamberlain. His hand resting on her shoulder. His smile kind. Her eyes full of wonder. She placed it on the desk. Then she pulled out the letter. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back in time. Don't be afraid. This house, this company, this world, they will try to crush you. But remember what I told you. Show them who you are. She folded it gently and placed it back inside. Then she looked out the window again. Quiet. People would talk. They already were. Some would say she tricked her way into power. Some would say she was lucky. Some would never accept her. But none of that mattered anymore. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to be heard. To be seen. To lead. The maid. The outcast. The woman they tried to break. If only they knew who she really was all along. She whispered to the empty room. If only they knew. Then the door opened. Julia walked in, camera in hand. Ready for your first real interview as CEO? Brenda nodded. Let's begin. And with that, the new chapter began. Not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been laughed at, pushed down, or ignored. Because now, the maid was the boss. And the world was finally listening.